the instrument that God chose to restore the gospel had.
Here's where I have a problem with the church coming out in 2015, I believe it was, and showing Joseph's egg-shaped brown stone, and just matter-of-factly, like, oh, yes, he used this to translate the plates and to help get the message of the Book of Mormon. I accepted it, actually, at the time. I was like, huh, wow. But I also was very much in still that magical kind of perspective that God can do anything through whatever tool or means he wants to. So I was like, okay, whatever, like, that's cool. I remember my mom saying, I'm really surprised they are doing that. And then later down the road, when I realized, wait a second, I was told growing up that was just an anti-Mormon lie. That's silly, and that's not how Joseph translated the plates. I saw pictures and art and all of that of him actually looking at the plates, and it would make sense that one would need this object that you had to work so hard to get, and that people had to work so hard to carry and bury them and keep them, and then an angel had to come, and he had to wait for years, and he had to do all these things to gain them. But yet when it came down to getting the message from them, they weren't needed. They weren't necessary. We just needed a rock and a hat. That's weird. It's like, oh, yeah, and by the way, that thing that was anti-Mormon, like, yeah, no, it's true. Here. Why hide it? Why try to pretty it up or clean it up or make it more believable? If it's really true, and this is how God works, why would we not state that? And it makes me just kind of look to God. Like, really?
To restore the gospel had to be somebody who was open enough to be able to receive new revelation. And so some of the folk magic things that the Smith family believed in facilitated that characteristic within Joseph.
So this is why folk magic and all of that, and Joseph being steeped in it, was so important, because it was creating the person that the Lord needed, the instrument, to work through. And then in the next sentence, you're like, and yeah, it's not a big deal, because like there were so many practitioners of folk magic at Joseph's time, like it wasn't even a big deal. It was just a cultural thing.
In terms of, like treasure digging and things like that, I think people make a bigger deal out of the treasure digging than, it was a type of folk magic. There were a lot of practitioners of this back then. It was not something that was so uncommon. And I mean,
Weird. And discussing like the Jupiter talisman and the scrying stones and seer stones, and then just saying, well, and what's the big deal anyways? I mean, there's all those type of things, God imbuing physical items with power or abilities that are beyond this earthly realm. It happens all the time in the Bible.
Certainly things like divination rods and things like that exist in the Bible. I mean, within Christianity itself.
So there we've got an issue. If you're like me, you interpret the Bible and the Book of Mormon to be literal. Like it's literal, right? And so it works in this case. Oh, it's literal. So if he used divining rods and things in the Bible, then why wouldn't he use them in Joseph's time? Why wouldn't that kind of magic work now if it worked in the Bible? You get in a lot of trouble with a literalistic interpretation of the Bible. Like, there's unicorns in the Bible, and water coming from rocks, and rivers turning to blood, and seas parting, and staffs turning into serpents and back into a staff, and women turning into pillars of salt. So to help support the concept of Joseph Smith using tools that were part of occult magic in order for the Lord to be able to commune with him or to reveal truths to him, then you're saying all those other things in the Bible, it's all got to be literal. And it's just a problem.
Like, Joseph Smith's Jupiter talisman that he supposedly had, like, I think the historicalness of that is a little bit sketchy in terms of whether that was actually a thing that he carried with him.
And as for the reality of Joseph Smith's belief in or carrying on his person a personal Jupiter's talisman, I don't think it's a big deal if we would have just said it all along the way. It's that we demonize those kind of things, and magic and any power that isn't godly power is satanic power. So to do those things and that whole treasure digging and stuff, that would have been to utilize Satan's power, which, I mean, it just gets so messy, right? But you say that it's not, I don't know if I really believe that. I think the evidence is wishy-washy, but I do know for a fact that Joseph and Hiram's Masonic stones.
Now, I know that Joseph and Hiram's Masonic stones existed because in about 2004, I saw them for sale on eBay.
Which I cannot find any evidence of any sort of Masonic stone. I'm talking to a few people to confirm that. But I've done a lot of research on Freemasonry, and I don't believe there's such a thing as Mason stones. Like, that's not a thing. But you're sure that it is, and you're sure that they existed and that Joseph and Hiram carried those because you saw them on eBay. I've got some rocks to sell.
These things exist and these things are true. They still don't explain where the Book of Mormon came from. They still don't explain how Joseph was able to produce this intensely Christ-focused book.
And just to wrap it up, my opinion is that Joseph, to create this book that was so deeply Christian and Christ-like and Christ-centered, because he was in America at a time when everything was Christian and was about Jesus and restoring his true original church back to the earth. So many religions, so many groups, it was a thing. And so his book would, of course, follow that same kind of belief and purpose. And I think that's why it's so Christ-centered, because America at the time was super Christ-centered. The restoration was a thing that so many religions were trying to do. They were everywhere, all around. There was a place called the New Jerusalem, just 20 miles south of him. There were other prophets calling apostles, claiming visions, doing the same thing. So it's interesting. I love it. I'd love to discuss it more. Thanks for giving me an opportunity.